a cloud. All right. Good evening, Shoshana and Junior, Paul, Roy, Cynthia, Richard, and Junior, and others. So this is our second session of Torat Chayim, Jewish life skills. And the focus tonight is beginning a daily prayer practice. And we're only actually going to look at starting with one thing. Okay. I just want to begin with one thing to start.
Rabbi.
As a beginning. Yes, Junior.
Excuse me. No, because my phone is new, and I was wondering that because it says is recording this meeting. That's you or that's my phone?
It is me recording. It just
okay.
No.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I thought that it was my phone.
It's getting your consent to be recorded.
It's okay. It's okay. I thought that it was my phone.
No,
okay.
Your phone is not recording.
Okay, that's fine.
It's
okay. Bye.
Okay, no problem. All right. So, hello, Stephen. So, Torat Chayim, Jewish life skills, beginning a daily prayer practice. I'm actually only going to look at one prayer that I think is where one should start, maybe two, to keep it very simple. But I want to take a step back and look at Jewish prayer in general to kind of ground us in what Jewish prayer actually is. So, I'll ask you some questions. Number one, what is prayer? What is it?
Good question.
You can raise your hand, or you can just type in the chat. What is it?
Communicating with God.
Communicating with God. Okay, and then of course, if that is the case, what is the content of the communication?
Usually praising or asking.
Praising, asking. Good. A classic major modes there. Good. Others?
I think of it as conversation.
More of a dialogue.
Yeah.
With God. No. You can know. Cynthia has her view. You could say, I feel differently, and that's fine.
Well, I feel different than Cynthia.
Okay.
I want to know when God responds.
So where does the dialogue take place? That is a great question. It's a great follow-up question. If it is a dialogue, then where do we hear God in the dialogue? That's a very good follow-up question.
Right.
Taking a page from the improv book. If that, then what? And what's the next logical thing? That's a great. I have two basic thoughts on that, which we'll look at in a bit. But that's a great question. If it is a dialogue, then where do we hear God's voice? What do we even mean by God's voice? Good question. All right, so we have communication, need, praise, and then dialogue. Where is God's voice in that? I see we have in the chat. Connection with God. So it's even a more little basic or even nonverbal. It's simply like a kind of making a connection with God. Of course, what do we mean by God? Different class. But suffice to say, to connect with something beyond. Paul, I see your hand.
Yeah, I perceive it as to a certain extent a conversation with myself. In terms of resetting or looking, not really asking for things, but trying to reset my mind in some ways.
Okay, more of an internal process, maybe even
an internal process, because I don't hear a response. So
okay, right. You just hear your own inner monologue, your own inner dialogue with yourself, even.
Yeah.
And for you, prayer is engaging in that inner dialogue, inner monologue in some way. You said to reset, could be meditative, could be self-reflective. Great. That's great.
Well,
all these are, of course, not at all surprising answers. And I think you're gonna be surprised that a lot of the sources I have brought, these are basically, in their own words, they're saying very similar things. What they're not saying is, and this is not a surprise to me, but it was nice to see it reaffirmed again. They're not saying, oh, prayer changes God's will, which then changes other things in the world. They do not say that. That is not a Jewish view of prayer. To quote the wonderful author John Green, I'm a fan. What can I say? He's great in many, many ways. The world is not a wish factory. You cannot simply pray for things and expect to get it.
It's, what was it? I think, you have to put the effort toward making change.
So that's interesting too. So that's a reflexive thing. So, and that's kind of like, I think what Paul was also getting towards is that the main thing that is impacted in the course of prayer is the individual, is the I, the one praying. I mean, the Hebrew word to pray, lihit palel, is of the verb form that is reflexive, the thing that you do to yourself.
Well, I think there's two things too, is that if there's action required, it's usually my action. And the other is if there's something like sickness and so forth, that there's a hope that you have some place to go, whether it be answered or not. That's
Right.
another issue.
So prayer is a kind of expression without any expectation of an active response, but just to be heard. Whether it's you hearing it yourself, God hearing it, God hearing you, just to be heard is actually another reason why people pray. Not with any.
But maybe the thing that something could happen, fate, it's more a fate type of thing, that fate will turn your way, or that there will be a positive outcome, like on illness or somebody's sick.
Right.
Which you can't do anything about, really, hardly do anything about, and you're hoping that something will change.
Right. That's the hope part. I think that the prayer for the sick, which we do on Shabbat mornings, I think sometimes is like that litmus test. What do you think is happening during the Mishaberach for the ill on Shabbat morning? Like, what's actually going on there? Is it that we are collectively expressing hope? Is it we are announcing, hey, so-and-so is sick? Do we actually think that we're actually metaphysically changing the universe so the people heal? Is it that we're reminding ourselves, oh, I should go visit or call so-and-so to see how they're doing? Like, what is going on in the Mishaberach for the ill? And with the answer to that, I think, gets at people's theology of prayer pretty fast. Because that's where we're
I think it's all those things, Rabbi.
I know, but
yeah,
I don't think that, my own theology of prayer, that it's not a metaphysical, like, my prayer will actually change their well-being. Although I have read about studies where, in double-blind studies, people who were being prayed for but didn't know it had better outcomes than those who weren't being prayed for. So there's that, as just documentary evidence that someone did a double-blind study about that one time. So Shauna.
I think sometimes, for me, I know that because my sister and my father have both been ill, I think it's me sending out a special energy just to kind of, because I'm not near them, so just letting so I feel like the energy is saying, okay, I'm sending you my thoughts, my prayers, even a bit of my own, like even my own health, saying, I want you to do good, so I'm going to send you good.
Right, diminishing the self in some way.
Well, in some ways, yeah, but also making sure that, like, that energy, like that spiritual energy reaches you.
Sure. I'm for myself kind of like, maybe. I find that there I become an agnostic when it comes to that kind of thoughts. I just don't know. But I know exactly what you're thinking about, what you're saying. I have felt that. I'm agnostic about whether I actually think that it actually happens. I hope it does. I just have no idea. Covering our bases. Prayer is CYA.
Straight to the point.
Covering our tushies. All right. So we're going to look at a few primary sources that I found on Sefaria. The first one, there's a book called Sefer HaMitzvot. It is a Sefer HaMitzvot that is it's its own book. It's not by any other well-known sage. He basically catalogs in the Torah all of the commandments, all the positive ones, all the negative ones. Positive meaning do this, negative one meaning don't do that. So this actually is the fifth commandment in his list. Oop, I did not mean to make that happen. It's his list. Now, that's... the book is called Sefer HaMitzvot, I'll need to check on who he is. I will check on that.
No,
I should have his name.
I was gonna ask this, what are the first four?
Right, I didn't bring those to a different session, did bring those to you, but it's number 5 on the list. There actually is a debate among the rabbis whether praying is actually a biblical commandment or not. Some say that it is a biblical commandment.
What are the reasons for not though?
There's no verse that says there, go pray.
Just because, okay, just.
There's
because
just no direct language saying, now go over there and like say words to God from wherever you're standing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, no, so those who say, but then those say, oh, the rabbis created the prayer system, but there's no biblical commandment to do so. But most rabbis, like the sages, think that there actually is a general biblical commandment to pray in general, and that the rabbis then kind of create the system that we have. That is the view of Sefer HaMitzvot. Is that we have we will look at the verse that is like the core verse where it's rooted, and then we'll look at some of the key ways in which it gets expanded or gets designed by the rabbis and how they connect that to our past. So the 5th mitzvah is that we are commanded to serve God. Now, serving God, of course, in different generations has meant different things. That could have meant make an animal offering, as we will see with Parshat Noah, when Noah offers an animal after the flood. So serving God could mean that, could mean other things too. This commandment is repeated many times, and he just quotes a few, and you shall serve God, your Lord, you shall serve God, and to serve God. Just, some phrases that are relatively well known. It occurs again and again and again. Although this commandment is of a general nature, as is explained in the 4th principle, and apparently should not be included in the count of the 613 mitzvot, nevertheless, it has a specific quality since it is the commandment to pray. Now, actually, I take back what I said. This is Maimonides. This is the Rambam in his, and he is one of the ones who think that the prayer has a biblical root. So this is Maimonides. I just remembered who it was. He thinks that serving God specifically is, and generically, prayer. 1 second, mute people just for the time being. We see that service is not just a general command from the following statements. And the Sifrei, an early rabbinic midrash, says the verse, and to serve God, means prayer. And the sages also said the verse, and to serve God, means Torah study. So for the early rabbis, when they read serving God, and this is post-temple, serving God clearly can no longer mean in the temple because it is gone. Therefore, it means prayer and study. These are the two things that are now filling in as how we serve God, or it's always been this way, and now it's just clearer that the temple is no longer part of Jewish life. In the mission of Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, the sages said, what is the biblical source to include prayer among the mitzvot? From the verse, and here's the verse that he roots it in, you shall be in awe of God the eternal, and you shall serve God. They also said, serve God through God's Torah, serve God in God's temple. The statement to serve God in God's temple means that one's goal should be to pray in the temple or in the direction of the temple, as King Solomon explained. So here, serving God b'mikdasho, in God's temple, bet can be both the locative, like it means you serve God in the temple, but bet can also be the instrumental or the directional, meaning towards. So the direction of prayer is read in that verse and not the specific, the things we did at the temple, that's how we serve God. We serve God in the direction of, meaning praying towards the temple in Jerusalem. And King Solomon actually, in his blessing, when he dedicates a temple, actually talks about people in the diaspora praying towards the new temple. It's actually in the very inaugural speech. Were there any comments on this or questions on this? I thought I saw hands. Want to just make sure that no loose ends are left loose. Stephen,
Well,
you're shaking your head like I don't believe this stuff.
I can't accept when you talk to me to wrap my head around the premise that serving God is prayer.
So
I understand studying Torah, that makes perfectly good sense to me.
it's a stretch for you, making that leap.
No, I accept Torah.
No, but the serving God part as prayer,
Prayer. Yeah, we don't see it as serving God.
so it's very interesting. So how do you get from bringing animals, wine, oil, grain, sacrifices as serving God? How do you then replace that with just the verbal, linguistic, meditative experience of prayer? They're so different. I mean, they're so different. How do you move from one to the others? And the rabbis are quite daring in that sense that they actually make the shift. And Maimonides is like, oh, this is actually what the word means originally. Not even that it's a replacement. This is what it meant from the very beginning. And the temple is almost like a temporary replacement for prayer. And now we're back to prayer, which is a very interesting take. He thinks that prayer is original.
I was gonna say, were prayers done during the time of animal sacrifices while being in the temple at all?
We don't know about first temple liturgy. We know that in the second temple, there was a choir, there was a band, psalms were recited, either routinely based on situation or upon request from the person bringing the offering. We know that the priests had a daily prayer practice, and some of our liturgy does take what they did and sort of rework it for everybody. But Maimonides gets at like there's a core commandment upon everybody to pray to God daily. And that's very much Maimonides. It's rooted in that. And the verse specifically, Deuteronomy 11:13, if then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the eternal your God with all your heart and soul. And so here we have the phrase ula ovdo, and to serve God. And that's the one that for Maimonides is about prayer. But what's interesting about it is that prior to it is loving God. And in another place is also awe. So fear and love, if you will, usually precede serving God. And in a lot of the rabbinic commentary, if you don't have a love of and or awe of God, then you really can't pray. Like if you're not feeling one or both of those feelings, then what you're doing is something just different than prayer. It's just not prayer, it's something else. But prayer requires having that one or both of those feelings before to actually get into the frame of mind that actually is what prayer is. If you think that you do not owe God anything or not in awe of God for anything, then you are, in general, too arrogant to be anything but God's self, and therefore how can you pray to yourself? That's idolatry.
So when we come on Saturday morning and we do chocolates and the Torah,
Yeah.
Stuff, are we praying?
Yes, we are. Well, ideally we are. Only in the individual knows what they're actually doing. Ideally, we're all coming into that space with some kind of expression of love for God in our hearts and minds, and we're expressing it through the words of liturgy. But if you were just to come in the room and just to read the words with no thought of what we're doing, maybe it's just rehearsal for the next time when we actually are praying with more intent. And that's fine. Praying 1,000 times to hit the one home run where you feel it, that's not a bad thing either. Prayer is a practice because it takes practice. It's something that we do every day. We don't always feel it. So that's not that it has no value, not that you're not praying, but if part of prayer is feeling that you prayed, that's a very subjective thing. That's very subjective. Far from me to say who has or hadn't prayed. That's only the individual knows if they've prayed, in some kind of authentic feeling way. That's up to the individual. The Sifrei that Rambam referred to is the next one. It's Ula Ovdo, this is prayer. And then the response is, that's prayer? Well, maybe it's actually, the temple service, right? Isn't that what it actually means? It is therefore written in the next phrase, we have this other verse earlier in Deuteronomy from the Shema that says that you have to love God with all your heart, mind, body, and stuff, for lack of better translation at the moment. And therefore, how do you serve God in your heart, which is the intellect? Oh, that's clearly prayer. So they read B'chol levavecha as, serving God is this intellectual activity. Well, therefore, it must be prayer. Now, prayer could also include a kind of meditation. It certainly does have it, or like an inner reflective process. The word certainly has that implied as well. So this is really like the core text where serving God in the heart, avodah shabalev, that is how they really phrase it. Yes, there is serving God at the temple. This is serving God in the heart, in the mind, of the intellect. That's prayer. So that's sort of like the core for Maimonides, is this very in your head process. All right. Hello, Lorene. Glad you're here. Okay, so why do we pray 3 times a day, and why does it matter? So there's a very old debate in the Talmud about the basic schedule of Jewish prayer. Jewish prayer basically is done 3 times a day. There's an evening prayer, there's a morning prayer, and an afternoon prayer. And that's a very early assumption about how Jewish prayer is. And so the rabbis debate, like, where did this come from? Because everything that we do has to be rooted in something in the Torah. It's got to be. So we have a debate. Of course we do. It was stated, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, the practice of praying 3 times daily is ancient, albeit not in its present form. Right, the schedule is old. The words that we use in the rabbinic period are clearly 1st century, maybe late century before the year 0. Prayers were instituted by the patriarchs. So here we have, let's root prayer in the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So prayer is then not just connecting to God, but it's actually live action role playing of moments of the life of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, who is the early riser, he begins the Shacharit prayer. So whenever we're praying in the morning, we are embodying a bit of like the Abrahamic early morning prayer enthusiasm. Isaac, when he goes out in the field in the middle of the day to meditate, lasuach basadeh, and the word siach means to converse, a la Cynthia's approach. When he sees Rebecca approaching on a train of camels, that's the afternoon prayer, the mincha prayer. So afternoon pausing to go out to the field, that's an Isaac type moment. And Jacob always bumps into God at night, so he institutes the evening prayer. So prayer at night is embodying Jacob's long, dark night of the soul, as it were. So we're LARPing when we pray on some level. That's one. So we're really, and a lot of halacha is, for some of the rabbis, getting us to behave like the patriarchs did on an instinctive level, but we do it on a more of a deliberate, affected, intellectual level. Like we're trying to get to be like them, but we need halacha to do it. They just did it pre-Sinai from a gut level. Good on them. However, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said the prayers were instituted based on the daily offerings sacrificed in the Holy Temple. And the prayers parallel the offerings in terms of both time and characteristics. Well, that's true too. If you read the book of Leviticus, there's the daily morning prayer, there's an afternoon prayer, and at night they would clean off the altar from the ashes, which parallels the evening prayer. And we do Musaf. Musaf's not any of the patriarchs. That's based on the temple, the temple offerings. That one sounds very sensible too. So Rabbi Yossi, son of Hanina, responds, or could have responded to you, actually, I will say to you that the patriarchs instituted the prayers and the sages based the times and characteristics of prayer on the temple offerings, even though they don't stem from the same source. In other words, the patriarch's layer is correct, and the sages then take the temple stuff when they created more of the form of prayer, but overlaid with what the patriarchs did. So it really is like a hybrid system for Rabbi Yossi. It's both. It's both. It's both reflects of the earliest lives of Israel's family, and it is a replacement for the temple. So we connect to both like the individual and the national. And prayer is both individual and national. Amidah is both individual stuff and national stuff. It does kind of reflect the duality of this hybrid model. Stephen.
In the communities today,
Yeah.
when they say the three services, don't they usually run the afternoon and evening service
Back to back? It depends. That's
Usually a pause of 5 or 6 minutes between.
right. That's a pragmatic thing. Stephen's asking, in communities that do daily minyan, do they not often put mincha mariv back to back? And they do. Some places they do them back to back. So mincha is right at the end of mincha time, mariv is right at the beginning of mariv time, and it floats throughout the year based on the time of day. Some places they do it at the same time every day, and they do one or the other or both based on whatever the sun and the moon allow. So there's a few ways that gets done. Yes, but because people aren't going to gather 3 times a day, 2 times a day. Yes, so pragmatically, it's a good system.
Well, historically here.
Yeah.
In Wichita, Kansas. It's been a long time since we've ever had the afternoon.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But there's been many times, almost I would say 90% of the time, when we have Shiva.
Yes.
If they do the afternoon service, it's like a 5-minute pause.
Yeah.
And then they do the evening service.
Right.
In the home of wherever the Shiva is.
Right. More opportunities to say Kaddish, basically. Exactly. That's you see that reflected in that. Yep. So to finish this passage, as if you do not say so, that it's a hybrid system, that even Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, would agree that the laws of offerings and those of prayers are related, then according to Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, who added Musaf? Where did Musaf come from? If it's all about the patriarchs, where did Musaf come from? Is it not one of the prayers instituted by the forefathers? No, sorry, it is not. It isn't. Rather, even according to Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, basically it was the patriarchs created the 3-part structure, and then the sages took that basic framework and added a temple-based system on top of it. So everyone agrees it's patriarchs, and then the temple is like the contours of the system. So it's both the personal and the national. And like I said, if you look at the Amidah, you'll see it is both personal blessings and national blessings. So it kind of reflects, I think, that duality there as well.
When you say national, you know, prayers for Israel or something like that?
Yeah, prayers for prayers for the collective, prayers for, health, prayers for, wisdom, prayers for, insight, a good year, personal, local. And then there are ones that are like, rebuilding Jerusalem, restoring the judges on a national level. The exile ending, national concerns. So kind of getting to well, fine. If I'm going to begin if one's going to begin a daily prayer practice, what's the most important stuff? What's like the number one on your list? So here's another passage from the Talmud that says, well, here's 2 parts that are clearly very important. And if you have to pick one over the other, here's a way that they prioritize them. Because I think that to begin a daily habit, one should begin small. One should begin small, and then, when that one's ingrained, add something else. Then, when that one feels ingrained, habitual, add something else. Do not do everything day one. That is not a recipe for success. So here's just one, priority passage. Rabbi Elazar said, with a different opinion, one who is uncertain whether he recited the Shema or whether he did not recite the Shema. Like, it's Tuesday, you're like, did I say the Shema today? Or was that yesterday? The days have all blurred together. I don't know. I can look at that.
If you say it like 3 times, don't you?
Well, let's say it's morning, and the morning is getting on, and the end of the Shema time is coming. You're like, did I say that, or was it yesterday? If you're not sure, you say it again. The Shema is so important. Even if you say it twice by accident, good. Just say it again. We'll come back to why. Because the Torah has a commandment to say the Shema. However, if one is uncertain whether or not he prayed, in other words, did I do the Amidah, the 19 blessings that form the core of every Jewish service, or whether he did not pray, he does not pray again. It's only rabbinic. Not only, but you don't want to pray twice. You don't pray twice. And Rabbi Yochanan said, actually, you do pray again, if only we could pray the whole darn day. Wouldn't that be nice? I believe he actually is the halacha. The halacha does go like him, but you've got to certainly where the Shema is like number one priority. Affirming God's oneness is like at the core of Jewish theology. God is one, not two. God is all that there is. Any way you want to phrase that, God's essential oneness is like the most important thing. If you did it, but you forgot, do it again. The rabbis are a little more equivocal on prayer itself. In the end, it comes down to, if you forgot to pray, yes, pray again, but it's not as stringent originally as saying the Shema was. But in the end, they do kind of come down to making it as obligatory, but the Shema is clearly like the most important thing. And we'll look at the Shema and break it down in a bit. That's one of the 2 things I think that people could begin with to begin like a nice small daily practice. Okay, so why pray? So I found a couple really interesting passages about what we're doing. I think a lot of what you guys said are reflected in these passages. So, Rabbi Isaac of Corbeil, 13th century France, known as the Smak, the Sefer Mitzvot Katan, the little book of mitzvot. It's in one of those other like list of mitzvot. For him, it's number 11. So now you know. There's a mitzvah to pray with intent every day. And that's interesting. So not only is he saying that you actually have to simply do the words, he's saying, no, there has to be what he calls, and the rabbis call, kavanah. There has to be some kind of purpose, direction, meaning, intent. I have to mean what I say in some way, or add something personal to what I say in some way, or to make it meaningful in some way. For him, that is the ingredient that makes it all work. The best analogy I've heard for this is that Jewish prayer is like freeze-dried coffee. If you take a spoonful of freeze-dried coffee, you put it in your mouth, you did have coffee, but it was not very good. Then you got a nice mug of steaming hot water. You can drink that. It might warm you up, but it is not a very good experience. So if you take that freeze-dried coffee, put it in that mug of hot water, then you've got something really hot and delicious. So Reb Zalman compares the liturgy to the freeze-dried coffee and kavanah to the hot water. So we bring the hot water to the freeze-dried liturgy, and the combination is quite delicious. I love it. I also like sticking a tea bag in your mouth. This chamomile is great, but if you put it in hot water, it's much better. So kavanah is the thing that makes it all work. And to serve God with all your heart. And he's quoting back to the Sifrei. As the rabbis expounded, what is service of the heart? This is prayer. And he adds with intent. So he really wants intent to be front and center. It is better to pray a little with kavanah than a lot with no kavanah. And that gets codified in all the codes of law after this point as well. Like kavanah is very important. You should do less with more kavanah. And when the one prays, if one requests something, do not expect it. Don't expect it. very clear, al yitzapeh, do not anticipate getting it. And say, because of my prayer, God will fulfill my request. So here we have the John Green view of theology. Prayer is not a wish factory. That is not going to happen. It's just not. Don't expect that.
Well, that's completely true.
Okay.
For 60, 75, 65, 68 years, I'm in different. If I can make it another year, another 65 or 67 years to the good.
But he would say, don't expect it.
Oh.
And maybe don't think that your prayer caused it. I think he wants to, I think he's trying to break the magical thinking of prayer causality. If I pray harder, I'll get the pony. You're not getting the pony for so many reasons.
Well, my husband had been watching MASH, and one of the best episodes, of course, was when the one guy comes and says he's Jesus Christ, and the last question the psychiatrist asks him is it true God answers all prayers? And the man responds, yes. Sometimes the answer is
no. Great answer.
What are we watching?
Matt.
But we've been watching.
Okay.
Yes, The Onion, my favorite news satire, said the same thing.
Yeah.
God answered little boy's prayer to walk again. No.
Yeah.
Boy's like, at least I got an answer. For this is among the things that Rabbi said remind God of humanity's sins. Like, basically, stop asking for stuff and expecting it. That's just like problematic.
It's like you're asking for a miracle, but in many ways, it's not God's. I don't know if it's God's job to
Department,
say,
as it were.
I guess.
Right. And that gets into and this is like a big issue too, if you believe in divine providence, that God looks out for individuals based on some kind of system, whatever that system looks like, how does it work? And do you believe in that? Maimonides in particular is not big on divine providence in a particular individual way. Maimonides is into divine wisdom in a very broad, universal way. Like, you've all got oxygen, good. You've all got, soil, sun, wind, rain, water. Your bodies function most of the time, good. But not any kind of particular way.
But you're also asking, when you ask God for something, I mean, it's when you say, asking for a pony, well, no, God's not going to give you one, but you do have to work towards if you really do want.
Right, I might clarify you how much you want the pony, right? And then, I should really do this. It would give you clarity and vision to get the pony. And maybe that means that's what prayer does. So here's the thing, rather you should think that God gives you your needs out of kindness. In other words, all that we get from God is because of God's chesed, God's overflowing love in the universe, and that's simply what we get all the time. And that and that which you are requesting now in prayer is merely to remind yourself how dependent you are on your Creator. That I need this and that, and without God, I couldn't fulfill my needs. So it's actually, Paul, kind of like what you were saying. It really is. You're really talking to yourself to remind you about how much, well, for him, for Corbel, how much we depend upon things beyond our control for our daily existence. So here it really becomes like a mindfulness exercise, and that
it's more of an affirmation of God that that He exists, and that. But your requests are not. You're only requesting them from yourself, I guess.
Right. When I express how much I want, God's wisdom, I realize that, my mind is something that I received as an act of chesed. I did not buy it in a store, right? All the things that I need, that I get, I'm reminded how much I need them and how much I depend upon God, aka the universe, for them, right? So it's more of an affirmation than anything else. And that's not right. And this is a 13th century thinker. This is not 20th century post-Holocaust thinker. This is like 13th, yes, post-Crusade. So I'll say that for him. He had Soros, but he's like, no. Prayer is to remind us how much we utterly depend upon forces beyond our control, and we're grateful that we actually have the gift of life itself. It's an affirmation exercise.
I like that.
Yeah, not new. Feels contemporary in some ways. So here's something a little more contemporary. Rabbi Soloveitchik, great 20th century sage of modern Orthodoxy. Prayer is the doctrine of human needs. Prayer tells the individual, as well as the community, what his or its genuine needs are, what he should or should not petition God about. Of the 19 benedictions of the Amidah, 13 are connected with basic human needs, individual as well as social, national. Even 2 of the last 3 benedictions are of a petitional nature. In the section where it's supposed to be gratitude, there's still petition within the gratitude. The person in need is summoned to pray. Prayer and sarah, trouble, sorus, are inseparably linked. Who prays? Only the sufferer prays. If man does not find himself in narrow straits, if he's not troubled by anything, if he knows not what is, then he need not pray. To a happy man, to a contented man, the secret of prayer is not revealed. God needs neither thanks nor hymns. He wants to hear the outcry of man confronted with a ruthless reality. Paul.
Would you consider the internal discussion of what's right and what's wrong, or in terms of doing right, is that a form of prayer? Certainly is a form of communications, at least internally.
I think agonizing over ethics and morals is definitely troubling and certainly would lead to suffering. And I think that working on those issues certainly, I think, will bring one to prayer. Please God, help me do the right thing. That certainly is, that is a very valid, I think reason, to, cry out, as it were. Yeah. The person who is struggling with what is right and what is the right and good thing to do is probably not happy nor content. And understands what prayer is in those moments. God needs neither thanks nor hymns. You may remember on Yom Kippur, I quoted the comedian Bo Burnham, who said basically a very similar thing. Eat 1,000 crackers, sing 1,000 hymns, you're not going to heaven. Like who needs that, right? God does not need any of that. That is like ridiculous. God expects prayer to rise from a suffering world, cognizant of its genuine needs. Yeah, rough stuff. He did not mince words. In short, through prayer, man finds himself. Prayer enlightens man about his needs. I'm sorry about the whole gender thing. It's a quote. I can't change it. It tells man the story of his hidden hopes and expectations. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. Well, this is really uncomfortable for me to bring up.
Up to you.
What happens when you pray for someone who's terminally ill?
Mm-hmm.
You know that they're going to
die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still pray.
Of course I do. Because not all healing is improved life. Some healing, death is some kind of healing. So a resolution to suffering.
God, this is really hard for me to say.
And that's an armchair philosopher statement.
Okay.
I fully own my lack of experience with that.
Well, like say you have someone who
experienced it once.
Oh, man. 1 second, Paul. Look at you.
Now, what if you have someone who didn't do everything in their power to do the right thing, but yet they're still asking? They're still asking in prayer.
Oh, like they could have they made mistakes when it came to their personal health. Oh, yeah. In those moments, I don't judge. I understand the conflict, but like I wouldn't begrudge somebody, especially if they're asking to be prayed for. I wouldn't begrudge, somebody that. I was at someone's deathbed recently, and did that person do something that caused them to actually lose their life or not? Don't know.
I'll talk to you later. That's still really hard for me to get out.
We'll make a time. That'd be great. Sure, no problem. No, this is hard stuff for sure.
What did Paul want to say?
Yeah, Paul, what do you want to add or contribute?
No.
No, he's good.
Okay.
All right, that's cool.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I was just commenting that you only get to experience death once, so
That
it's
is,
hard to.
but unfortunately, through loved ones and friends, many times.
But death also is like the final chapter. It's not necessarily a punishment, or it's part of life.
Yeah, I don't view death as punishment. I mean, generally speaking, I do not view death as punishment. I view it as the natural, course of life. What?
The natural order of things.
Yeah, I mean, in the best way to think about it, it's part of the natural order of things. Hopefully, everyone's death comes at the end of a very long, fulfilling life.
But not everyone thinks that way, because sometimes it always depends on your point of view.
Of course. But I was like, this year, Yom Kippur, I really came to a very clear sense from the Machzor that the authors of the Machzor do not want people to think about death as a punishment.
It's really great, to really think about it, because, when the person, when a person passes, what's left are people mourning, and those people mourning might say, oh, that was a punishment, or oh, that was a blessing. It's not always...
Right. They're all, but not thinking how the Machzor was wanting us, how it's framing death.
Well, and also you're
People say
feelings. It's not, straight common sense or straight wisdom.
Yeah, also true. Yeah.
Feelings affect it.
Yeah. Oh, people might feel relief. Suffering is over. They might feel gratified, finally. All kinds of feelings. Yeah.
In terms, I was just thinking about Yom Kippur and the high holidays, how we pray to be in the book of life and so forth, that death is portrayed in there as if you aren't forgiving or don't ask for forgiveness or whatever, you're vulnerable to not getting a good mark on the book of life.
Actually, that's actually not what I found in the Machzor this year. I found actually something very surprising, and then we're a little off track. After this, we'll get back on track. I found that the Machzor, specifically Unatana Tokef, was actually saying that when somebody dies, it is never a judgment upon their character.
I like that.
It is simply the end of their life, which is out of their control almost all the time.
But when you're asking,
that is actually not a judgment, which is a very counterintuitive thing to say on Yom Kippur.
But it's also a great thing to say.
It is. Like, we all want one more year of life. We all want that. Some of us may get it, some of us won't. That's also out of our control. But when it comes, it is not a judgment. So says Unatana Tokef, which was, I thought, a very surprising thing to kind of realize, that it's trying to say something very nuanced about death. On Judgment Day, death is not a judgment. Death simply is, and you're judged on your life, your death is not the final verdict. It's just when the file stops, as it were. All right, we're gonna get back on track. These are all very important topics. Go back to prayer for the moment. So Rabbi Shagar, he's a 20th century rabbi, lived in Israel. His writings are kind of becoming very popular as of late. I have a colleague working on a book of his essays. This is his book on a piece on prayer. I pray, but am I certain that I will be answered? No, I am not certain. I'm also not certain that I will not. But the prayer does something. Someone hears. Who is the someone? We say God, but this word lacks any independent meaning. In other words, it's just a word we will say to fill in the blank. It is enough for me that I hear. Paul, to your point. But who is the I that hears? I believe in the deep I, the I with a transcendental horizon. This is what the Hasidim call the root of the soul. Where there is an I like this, there is God. And this is also very Martin Buber as well, where, in encountering another person as a thou, you encounter God as the eternal thou. He's turning prayer into an I thou moment, where when you encounter your deepest self, you're encountering God as the internal thou, or like the deep I, as he calls it. definitely and Buber came out of the Hasidic world too. So they kind of like drawing from similar wells of spirituality. But as long as like I hear my prayer, he has this faith that in some way, so does God, as that source of the divine spark. And this is a very Hasidic, non-dual view of God, where God is both fills and surrounds the world, and is really just like, energy clothed in physicality. So that God is everything, or everything is merely an expression of God, including the self. So there, who's listening? If I am listening to myself deeply, that's enough. I am sufficient when it comes to prayer. And the word Lihit Palel as a reflexive action, certainly here kind of has a very deep significance for Rav Shagar.
He's implying the first sentence that his prayer is something that might require it. Maybe like he's asking.
I think he's like, is there going to be a response? And he's like, don't know. He prays regardless of his confidence in an answer, or in the lack of an answer. He's simply open to the possibility, but there's no certainty. It's just not praying into the void, but it is praying without any expectation, one way or the other. But he does have faith that there is at least I am hearing my own prayer, and that actually does something. And that might even just change the self to, I now know what to do next.
Or to dig really deep.
Yeah, to get more into who this I actually is. So if I had to pick one thing, I would say this would be it. It would be Modah Ani. If I had to pick one thing to begin a daily prayer practice, I would recommend this. And I want to unpack it a little bit. Paul, I'm sorry, Paul, what do you want to add?
No, just back in the other set of comments, that there is a certain answer, because the discussion goes on into your head and you get a new perspective, or you reconcile that that's the right thing, or.
Yeah, I think that's that deep listening he's talking about. Maybe that deeper I, you kind of get to like what the real need is, what the next thing to do is. Yeah, now if you can get to that kind of a what I need to do now after prayer, that's good. That is really good. I would not take that for granted in the slightest. If that's what people came away with, that would be excellent. All right, I want to unpack Modah Ani, but I think Cynthia had her hand. Nope, okay. So Modah Ani, this is said first thing when waking up. So what I would say, if somebody wants to begin a prayer practice, is to get this printed out, keep it by the bedside, English, Hebrew, transliteration, whatever they want, doesn't matter. The first thing they say when they get up in the morning, put their feet on the floor and say this. And it is Modah Ani lefanecha, or Modah Ani lefanecha, Melech chai v'kayam, shehachazarta bi nishmati bechemla, rabba emunatecha. I give thanks in your presence, you living and everlasting sovereign, for you have returned my soul in me with mercy. Great is your faithfulness, or maybe trust. So I was thinking about Modah Ani and why it's such a good one-liner. That kind of gets at a lot of, I think, what Jewish prayer is about. So the first word is Modeh. You could say Ani Modeh lefanecha. You could. Totally grammatical, but Modeh is put first, which is the word for acknowledging our gratitude. I think putting gratitude first is a very powerful first word to put in the morning. You wake up with literally thankfulness on the lips, or acknowledgement. You acknowledge that without God, you simply would not exist. And you acknowledge that thing first out of the gate. The word Jew is from the word Yehuda, which means he gives thanks. It's kind of like part of our DNA, culturally speaking. We're the people who are grateful. So Modeh, there's gratitude. Then there's Ani. This actually is strange because most Jewish prayers are in the plural. This is one of the few that is in the singular. But I think to Rav Shagar's point, I think like this focusing on the ani, that prayer is experientially a personal thing that we do between I and myself. I think that the ani here nicely emphasizes that it is really, even when I'm in a crowd of people, the prayer still should be an internal process, dialogue, conversation, listening, whichever. The next word, lifanecha, in your presence, is that this sort of like brings in, without God's name, brings God into the picture. It brings in God as a you, as a one whom I can address. Whether you believe it or not, we at least act like we do. And that might be enough. KISS, keep it simple, sweetie. Just don't overthink it. But just kind of to be in the presence of the universe and be grateful that I am. And then we have the word melech. Melech, interesting word. Sovereign, king, ruler. Without getting into too many of the permutations, melech generally actually means source. And that's like a few, it comes to represent the word that means the source of everything. God, king as the creator of the universe language. Yes, more on that another time. Rabbi Marsha Prager's book on the path of blessing kind of unpacks the whole pathway. But melech generally should be understood as source of the universe, like melech haolam, source of the universe. So here we're acknowledging that the universe has a source and that it is way beyond us. And we have the word chai, living, and the word kayam, everlasting. And you don't really need both. Melech chai, perfectly good. Melech kayam, why do we have both? So the fact that like God is a living presence, I think speaks to like the dynamic and ever-changing unfoldingness of the universe. It is not a static universe. It is an ever-changing thing. It does also mean life. It is, but well, no, chayim means life. Chai is actually the verb. It's a strange verb.
Because when you see chai, that's what you mostly see on Jewish.
Right. But chayim means life. Chai means living. Yeah. So this it's a weird verb. Kayam means existence or endurance, but kayam for me here evokes, I think, the way that Maimonides expresses it, which is that God is like the matrix that makes existence possible, like the thing that makes existence exist. That God is that foundational fifth element, quintessence, to put it in Greek terms, that sort of makes everything possible. And it is chai, it is dynamic and changing. And you got shehechazarta, that God does something. And here that God actually returns, the soul to the individual. But there is this feeling that God is the one that meets our needs. And in this very basic way, I wake up in the morning, very basic. But that God is the one who, all that chesed, that loving kindness sort of just flows out into the universe that we are recipients of. And shehechazarta just kind of reminds me of that chesed. And then B is that, each of us individually receive this overflowing chesed, loving kindness, on a daily basis. Individually, every individual receives it, no matter what. And it's in a completely unjudging way. Like, no, everyone gets it, no one deserves it, as it were. You just get a day of life. I mean, if you do, great. If you don't, you don't. But if you do, there it is. And then nishmati, is the recognition that everyone has in them the breath of God, has within them, is made in the divine image. God's neshama, that's more of a Genesis 2 version than Genesis 1. It has a very similar connotation, that every single individual person carries within them that divine spark that Rav Shagar also mentioned. And bechemla. So there's that chemla, chesed, rachamim, they're all very similar. One of the various words that conveys God's overflowing love. And that this chemla is sort of what we all receive on a daily basis. And then Rabba emunatecha. This is a strange phrase. It could mean that we have a lot of trust in you, that we wake up every day, or it could mean that the day ahead of us is entrusted to us because God trusts us to do good with it. Unclear what it's a bit of a strange ending there, but I think that great is your trust. I think it really is in us. Like we have our souls, our lives, they have the day. God trusts us to basically do the rest. Like it's up to us. Good luck. I take a very Maimonidean view where it's very much like God's chesed, spills over, it makes everything happen, exist, do, and then the rest is totally up to us. That's where like divine providence ends and human free will takes over. Good luck. Have a good day. So I think that's a really good way to begin the morning. There's a lot that could be unpacked in Modah Ani. That's like my kavanah for Modah Ani. As I was preparing for this, like, why is that such a good way to begin the day? I think that's good. If we can have the kavanah to do Modah Ani like that in the morning, that's a very good beginning of a daily prayer practice. That's good. And then I would add the Shema on top of that.
Actually, it wasn't until you said, like, I always thought Melech meaning king,
Sure.
but why do we say that instead of just plain saying Adonai?
Actually, Adonai is missing from this blessing, or from this piece. Adonai is missing because it's very practical. We're in pajamas, or bedclothes, or less, we're in bed, and it wouldn't be appropriate to invoke God's name here while we're not really like fully dressed. That is exactly why Adonai is omitted from this blessing, from this actually not even a bracha. It's a very strange formula. Yes, Adonai is not here because we're not ready to address God in that more formal way.
So when they all wake up in the morning, they have to go ahead and say this?
People generally don't, because it doesn't have that format. Some people might. Some people might. I wouldn't worry about it too much. If it speaks to you, have your head covered, great. Have the kippah at the bedside, ready to go, fantastic. If not, I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about that. I would focus more on like what the words of Modah Ani could help us as a kind of a way to kind of greet the morning. And then I'm saying, if I would say a second thing, the Shema is clearly the next most important thing. Yeah, God's oneness, which is a word that is absolute gibberish to me at this point in my life. I don't even know what that means. Like God's oneness, like, yes, one God, not two gods. I get that mathematically, but if God is one, which means has no parts, which means is eternal and therefore is not a thing, I just hear that my mind just kind of melts, which is probably the point at some point. But sort of affirming that God is sort of beyond human comprehension and utterly and radically one and is the source of everything, like it hurts my brain a little bit, but it's sort of like it kind of like puts me into it radically decenters me and puts me more of like on a spoke than in the hub, puts God in the hub. I'm getting a thumbs up from Paul. Fantastic.
No, I'm getting it. I have a question.
Oh, okay. Yes, Paul. Good time.
Going back to the Modeh, returning my soul, or in here it says restoring my soul in the Sim Shalom.
Sure.
What is the vision that happens in the night? Is your soul lost somewhere, or is it?
So the rabbis imagined that sleep is 1/60th of death, and that the soul actually leaves the body, goes elsewhere, and then returns in the morning. I think when people wake up and they sort of feel like that deep first breath when they woke up, right? That's like, that's the neshama, like the non-sleep breathing returning to the body. That was seen as like the soul's return to the body. And they use the word neshama, not nefesh, for soul here. I think it very much is like that change in breathing was like, the quickening has happened. And now the soul is back and now they're awake.
How did they regard dreams?
Dreams happen in a different realm. Also, which makes dreams are also like prophecy, 1/60th thereof.
I wonder where the 60th came from.
Babylon. Babylonia. They're really into fraction. That's base 60. They're very into very Babylonian indeed. So I would say the Shema would be like the next one. If I add one more piece, I would add the Shema, and these are I think two very good beginning pieces for a daily, very very small and easy to begin a daily prayer
So
practice.
when you say the Shema, just the one sentence?
Minimal, yeah. But I'm talking about like beginning from zero to a beginning. These are like the beginning baby steps. This is what I would start with. Yep. I wanted to also look at briefly a couple of pieces of like what services look like. So take a look at the maps. Oh, I need to restart the screen share. 1 moment.
A map of the daily evening service?
Yes.
Daily, morning or evening. No,
Start with evening,
Okay,
because the evening is the first prayer of the day. Jewish days begin at night.
that's right. When I checked my birthday, it said, were you born at night?
Exactly.
So instead of being, I'm the first of all, instead of it might be your birthday.
Right. It actually does change birthday, changes the yard site. It does matter. So the evening service, for example, begins with well, let's actually look at the morning service first. I take it back. That really is like the basic service, and everything is really based on the morning service because everything's coming. Okay, so a typical weekday morning service has, I have not shown the proper one yet on the screen share. Daily morning service.
You
That's
said like the first breath of the world, unless your cat jumps on you and then the gas.
well, that's of course. I mean, Rabbi did not appreciate pets. All right, so
Oh, see, that's.
they're not even pets. What can I say? So the morning service has 4 basic components, 4 worlds that ascend up to the Amidah. So the first one, the morning blessings, Birkat Shachar, waking up, being in touch with our physical bodies, the physical world. These are the morning blessings, and they kind of connect us to and focus us on literally like getting up out of bed, opening our eyes, seeing things, feet on the floor, getting dressed, going to the bathroom, standing up, feeling your back work, taking steps, getting dressed, putting a hat on, very fundamental things, the physical. And then the next section is called Psuke de Zimra, verses of song, goes from the physical to the emotional, from gratitude to then wow, as we kind of move to like a larger view of the world, and begin to relate to and be in awe of the larger world around us. And that's stuff from Psalms and other places in the Hebrew Bible. And it's bookended with 2 blessings about praising God through different Psalms and songs. And then the third part, so the first part, also think of the first part as also addressing like our bodies from the waist down, our creaturely selves, our most animal-like selves are from the waist down. And then the emotional part is actually in the lower torso, in your intestines, in your kidneys and your liver. That's where emotions live, is in your guts. That's the emotional map. That's the rabbi's map of the body. Then going to the Shema's blessings goes to the upper torso where the heart is. That's the intellect. And that is then thinking about God's role in the larger world, with the Shema and its blessings, focusing on God as creator of the world, revealer of Torah, redeemer of slaves. And then going to the mind, which is beyond the intellect. That's like where we actually connect to our highest selves, being in God's presence. That's the Amidah. That's where the dialogue starts, where we basically speak to God, talk to the universe, and that is a world that transcends the physical and the intellectual and the emotional. That's the head. And then, certainly on Mondays and Thursdays, but on Shabbat in particular, there's the dialogue back, Cynthia. So we talk to God, God speaks to us through the Torah. Now, this is important because the early rabbis, the early Second Temple period, there's a shift from prophecy fading to the rise of hearing God's voice through words. So we hear God's voice through the reading of the Torah. And whatever that means, hearing it in that day, on that day, however it hits us, that is kind of how the dialogue happens. Rabbi Louis Finkelstein from my seminary said, when I pray, I talk to God. When I read Torah, God speaks to me. So the dialogue happens in the Amidah Torah service back and forth. And then there's the stuff at the end. There's Aleinu, Mourner's Kaddish, Psalm of the Day, Mourner's Kaddish, sort of like a coming down from that height, as it were, and time to integrate whatever that journey up the ladder gave us that day, and then we kind of head out for the day. This is like the basic service, and every other service has some, but not all of these parts. This is like the full-blown service. So let's take a look at the evening prayer, which has a shorter version. The evening prayer, let me turn to it 1 second. There we go. It does not have morning blessings. It does not have verses of song. It has a 2-line warm-up. Very quick, like Vehurachum, God is compassionate, God is merciful. That's all we get. A very short 2 lines there, and then right into the Shema blessings with an extra blessing that asks God to see us through the night, as a extra blessing there, and then that goes right into the Amidah, and then it concludes with Aleinu, Mourner's Kaddish, maybe a psalm for the day, and then good night. So it has really just like the Shema blessings and the Amidah, those 2 pieces, and then brief warm up, and then a brief cool down, as it were. Yeah. It can be done anytime from sunset until midnight, typically, or midpoint of the night. But really, it's until dawn, but people fall asleep. So until midnight or midpoint between night and day. And then the afternoon service is the shortest service. And it does not have the Shema's blessings at all. Hang on a second, let me turn to it. There it is. It's on the back, the last page. It begins with Ashrei, that one psalm, as sort of like a fill-in.
Oh, no, you went backwards.
Keep going.
No, other way.
The other back.
What?
There you go. Could go one more to the back. All right. So the afternoon service is just Ashrei, just like that one psalm with the beginning and closing verses, sort of like a fill-in for everything else as like a warm-up. Just the Amidah. And then there's also in the morning as well, but there also is Tachanun, which is this applies to the morning service as well. I just didn't put it in. I just forgot to put it in. Tachanun is after the Amidah, like the formal speaking to God while standing. Tachanun is this sitting down, face on your arm, just speaking to God on a personal, free form level. There is liturgy, but it also can just be very just free flowing from the heart. That's also part of the morning and afternoon services as well. And then there's, Aleinu Kaddish at the end. The typical, go out. But, thinking of afternoon prayer as like a midday check-in, how how's my day so far and the rest of the day, and then kind of go out and then the evening service is kind of like an end of the day review and then getting ready for the night. And Shacharit as like, preparing for the day. So they each have like their kind of like functions as sort of like, looking ahead to the day, midday check-in, end of the day review. I'm just saying this is sort of like, one way to look at how the 3 services map out, the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob map, or, Shacharit, Mincha, Mariv, temple service, maps work out as well. So if you are going to be, doing, one of these services, here's sort of like the why we do them the way we do them, or what each chunk, brings to us at that time of day. All right, any other just comments, questions? So really, I think if you're going to begin Modah Ani and the Shema, that's how I would begin. But kind of like to give us this orientation to Jewish prayer in general, I think is also helpful. It's kind of just to reorient as we're kind of building up a practice.
This is helpful.
I am very glad. Helps me. It helps me. It's always helpful to find, Rabbi Shagar is a new Jewish voice in my own personal study, and I'm very curious to learn more about him as well. So curious to see what he brings to the table. Definitely a very modern sensibility. All right, if you have no other questions at the moment, thank you, Paul and Roy, Cynthia, Junior, Lorraine, and Richard, and Shoshana and Stephen for all being together.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.